Empire.
Well, we made it. Super Bowl 55 is in the books. And what an epic Super Bowl it was. Maybe not if you're a Chiefs fan, but if you're just a football fan, it was huge. What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And yes, here we are. Tom Brady winning his 7th Super Bowl. The Bucs winning their 2nd in franchise history, knocking off the team that we thought was the next dynasty, and maybe they still will be, but they will not be the first back-to-back Super Bowl champs since 2016. It was a great performance by the Bucs, masterful performance, top to bottom, and to document it all, put a bow on the season, I've got Peter King joining us once again to discuss it. And, had him on almost midway point of the season. And now here we are at the end of the season. Always appreciate Peter's insight. And obviously, you've been following his work if you're a football fan for years and years. And so we have a really good conversation here about the Super Bowl, about different performances, and about the season. So let's get to it right now.
Support for this podcast comes from State Farm. It's no surprise that State Farm is there to help you protect your home or car, but you may be shocked to hear that State Farm offers surprisingly great rates. Yeah, that means you get a dedicated State Farm agent and access to their award-winning app, all at a surprisingly great rate. So if you're hearing my voice right now, State Farm probably has a surprisingly great rate for you. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
All right, and here we are. I'm really happy to have him back on the podcast. Peter King, you know him from Pro Football Talk, can obviously and probably already are following his great column where he will take you inside Football Morning in America, and obviously his podcast as well. Peter, how are you? And thanks for joining me.
Hi, Mike. Everything's okay. Thank you. It's decompression week in the land of football writers.
Yeah, we made it here. I didn't know what it was going to look like if we'd get to this finish line, but here we are. Super Bowl, all 256 regular season games, all playoff games. It's all in the books, and I'm happy that we're here.
I'm somewhat surprised. At the start of the year, I would have thought it would have taken at least one extra regular season week, if not more. And I'm a little surprised that the Super Bowl was held on February 7 as scheduled, but I think it's a tribute to two things. It's a tribute to the NFL following the science, and also the NFL having a bottomless pit of money to follow the science. I mean, Kevin Seifert wrote at ESPN, a week or so ago, in a very good story about how the NFL did this. He estimated that it costs upwards of $100 million to follow all the protocols, all the testing, everything like that. And so to me, I think, look, you can look at it in a lot of different ways. You can either say, oh my God, what a colossal waste of money. It's just football.
Yeah.
But I kind of hearken back to one of the things Alan Sills, the NFL's chief medical officer, told me in August, which is, America should be rooting for us.
Right.
America should be able to see that something that is really difficult and labor intensive with a lot of people involved can be accomplished. And so I do think money was a huge part of the NFL being able to put on this season. But I also think science was as well.
Yeah. And what do you think the difference is? Because we're seeing, the NBA is struggling they're having to cancel a lot of games. NHL having to cancel a lot of games. And they have fewer people to actually, to test and to monitor everything daily.
I think, Mike, I've thought a lot about that I'm probably the only person who who's a fan of the New Jersey Devils. I that happens to be the team that when my wife and I were raising our kids in New Jersey, we went to a lot of games, but they had to cancel all their games last week. It looks like this week they're canceling games too. But I keep trying to think about, okay, what is different in hockey? I mean, number one thing that is different, if you look at, let's just say, the Seattle Seahawks, who had sort of almost, they're like a kid in school. They have perfect attendance. They have not had many or any positive tests among their players, and I think very few otherwise, in their building. And I think one of the things that's really different about a football team, particularly a team that can be, for the most part, outside. The Rams, for instance, they did everything this year outside. You can't do that in basketball. You can't do that in hockey.
Right.
You're practicing inside. You're in a locker room. And I would assume they've spread people out in their locker rooms and everything like that. But I just think it's harder, and I would bet they're not spending the amount of money the NFL did per player to try to keep everybody healthy. But I've not asked anybody, Mike, but that would just be my gut feeling. You're doing everything inside, and it's clear that to stop the spread of the virus, it's much better to be outside. So that would be a guess of mine.
Yeah, you're right. It is pretty interesting and it's fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see also what the NFL carries over, what they have to carry over. Right? The combine's not going to happen. I was already told that, off-season workout programs probably aren't going to, be what they were before last year. But we'll see. But I do want to talk about the Super Bowl because I felt like it was a really fascinating game. I know it was a blowout, but I was intrigued the whole time. I guess if you were rooting for the Chiefs, it was an awful game. But just the way everything unfolded was so fascinating to me. What did you think of the Super Bowl?
At the beginning of the year, I picked the Bucs to win the Super Bowl, but I didn't really know exactly how the season would go. But I picked them, obviously, because they finally get a quarterback, whereas I think last year Jameis Winston had a total of 41 turnovers, and Brady this year had 14 or 15. And as Bruce Arians has told me on a couple of occasions, we just you can't win in the NFL by turning it over as much as you did. And quite honestly, Mike, I don't think it's that shocking that Tampa did this. Two reasons why. Number one, if you look at Tom Brady's history, okay, their teams are always better at the end of the year. They usually have a rough spot at some point, but they're better at the end of the year. And I'll refer specifically to that Atlanta Super Bowl where they came back from 28-3 down. And in the fourth quarter and overtime, the two receivers that Brady looked for the most were Chris Hogan and Malcolm Mitchell. And you say, so what does that mean? Well, what it means is that Tom Brady develops options as the year goes on. You see, as this year went on, one of his most important receivers in the playoffs was a guy named Tyler Johnson. He threw to him on that play in Green Bay in the championship game that Kevin King got called for interference. That was at that moment the biggest play of the Bucs season. And Tom Brady found a fifth-round rookie from Minnesota, which is just what he did with Malcolm Mitchell with the Patriots, this rookie who really only had 1 year with New England. And everybody said, well, what does that mean? Why are you referring to that? And I think it's because, Mike, Tom Brady basically practices with guys and he gets to know them. He gets to know exactly where they're going to be. And it doesn't matter if your name is Tyler Johnson or Malcolm Mitchell or Julian Edelman or Mike Evans. If he trusts that you're going to be where you should be at that moment, at the right moment, he's going to throw you the ball. So you don't have to be a superstar. So why did he throw it to Scotty Miller at the end of the half in Green Bay?
Yep.
And Scotty Miller, 4th or 6th round pick from Bowling Green. And, so Tom Brady, does not have sacred cows. It's funny. I talked to Rob Gronkowski after the game on Sunday, and I told him, I said, Bruce Arians has said to me that you, even after some games where you might have gotten one target or just one catch or something, I mean, your numbers are way down. Right. That he would say to you, hey, Gronk, you okay? Yeah, coach, I'm fine. I'm good. And, you need to have that sort of ethos on your team. And if Tom Brady is your quarterback, he doesn't want to hear, hey, man, I didn't catch 7 balls today. What's wrong? That's not in Brady's world. He doesn't care if he hands it off 64 times. He just wants to win the game. So,
yeah.
Mike, I guess I kind of look at it and just say I'm a little surprised, quite honestly, that Kansas City could not figure out how to keep Patrick Mahomes a little more clean. And but that was really about the biggest surprise of the game to me.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was looking and I was like, okay, we know, and that was the one concern for me was the pass protection with, and I named Shaq Barrett and Pierre-Paul as my 2 players to watch because of that. But I figured after the first quarter or even after halftime that they were going to come out with some extra protection, whether it was another blocking tight end or whether they went to some screen or some quick hitters or something to get the ball out of their hands. Right. And we just really didn't see that, which was really surprising to me because of the offensive genius that we see Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy as. But that adjustment, which they really needed, wasn't there.
As I have not watched the game back. I was going to do that today or tomorrow. I really want to watch the game. It's kind of funny. The Super Bowl is like, it's an incredible telecast with 1,000 cameras and all this other stuff. And I don't know, it's weird. We don't see the game, I mean, we don't see the game that America sees, Yeah. But I do want to look back. My impression without watching either the coach's tape or a replay of the game is that Andrew Wiley, the right tackle, who basically was taking Mitchell Schwartz's place, and Mitchell Schwartz is really an incredibly valuable player for the Chiefs, and he hasn't been there because of back issues. And Andrew Wiley, it just seemed, was a turnstile the whole game. Yeah. He's just not fit to play tackle in the NFL. And I mean, I thought Mike Remmers was okay on the left side. He did okay, better than he did against Von Miller in the Super Bowl 5 years ago when he, basically got victimized for Carolina. But I kind of think that a lot of it was Andrew Wiley, and I agree totally with you. I thought in the second half you would see a lot more chipping on that side, and 2 or 3 times we saw Shaq Barrett beat Andrew Wiley alone. Yeah. And I'm surprised. I feel exactly the same way as you. I'm surprised about it.
Yeah, and Mahomes after the game said something like, "We're gonna be what we are." I can't remember exactly. It was something like, "We're gonna do what we do." And I understand that, but at some point, when what you do isn't working,
right,
you gotta throw it off a little bit. Or they're playing the 2 high safeties, and the few times they were in the ball, that helped. But they didn't stick with that. So I wonder if Andy Reid could go back, what he would change with that. But I felt like masterful game plan by Todd Bowles. Great game plan by
Todd Bowles. Hey, Mike, Todd Bowles to me, and I felt honestly, so I wrote maybe 2,800 words about the game as the lead to my column, obviously, this week. And I said in the 3rd section of it, which was about the defense, hey, I apologize to Todd Bowles right here. He was the man of the hour in this game. And that defense was fantastic. And I feel bad about writing, about Brady and Arians, but I mean, Tom Brady has now won as many championships as any quarterback in NFL history. So right. I mean, it's hard not to write about Brady after a game like that. But I do think one of the things, and I got a chance to talk to Bowles, one of the things I have great admiration for with him is that he's never going to win a public speaking contest. Okay. And he's not going to stand up there and say, hey, look at me. It's just not who he is.
Right.
But I'll tell you the reason why his players love playing for him. After the first meeting against Kansas City this year, he walked into the room. They even though they only lost 27-24, it probably should have been about 47-24. Their offense was Kansas City's offense was so good and kind of so destructive, right, especially early. And and Tyreek Hill couldn't be stopped and everything. And he walked into the meeting room on Monday and he says, "Look," he said, "we got embarrassed yesterday. There's no other way to put it. We got embarrassed." But he said, it's one of 16. That's all it is. We're going to walk out of here today. That game is history. And now we're looking at next week. And, he has been there before. During the week, Devin White said something really interesting about Todd Bowles. He basically said, hey, we totally trust what Bowles tells us because, we're young. And we're still learning this game. There's so many young guys on that defense.
Right.
And Todd Bowles has been there as a player, as an assistant coach, as a head coach, as a coordinator. And I thought, Mike, look, I asked him this. I said, Todd, you've been doing defensive game plans for 8 years, 4 years as a coordinator, 4 years as a head coach. I said, this has to be the greatest game plan, both in terms of setting it up and then the execution in your career. And, typical him, he said to me, he said, well, I've probably had some better game plans, but then we went out and played like bleep. Yeah. So, but I mean, this game in all ways, I thought they executed it very well. Probably, I think they only blitzed 4 times, maybe 5.
Right.
And it turned out to be a really, really smart thing. And the one other thing, if this was Ndamukong Suh's last game as an NFL player, and it might be, I mean, he really did himself proud. And that was a really good guy to bring back for one more year. Now, I heard after the game that he's probably not going to retire. So we'll see.
Right.
But they had all the elements in place, including a secondary that learned a lot from that first game.
Yeah, exactly. And also, with Suh, I mean, he was inside. They even put him on the end sometimes. I mean, he really balled out for a guy who had gotten there with the Rams and fell short, and then went there. And I was happy for him just because you could tell he was a man on a mission.
Yeah.
Byron Leftwich, I thought, had a really good game plan as well. He adjusted the 2 ugly 3-and-outs to start the game, and then he really found a rhythm, mixed it in the run game, the play action, the misdirection, the short game. I just felt like, this guy right here, it's amazing he didn't get a head coaching interview even, but he did a really masterful job of marrying in that second half of the season what they like to do with what Tom Brady did well. And in the Super Bowl, I just thought he did, hats off to him as well.
Look, there's going to be in the coming days, I hope, there's going to be some discussion of what happened in that bye week. Really, the Bucs had the latest bye week this year. They had the last bye week. I think it was them, maybe Carolina, I forget. But there were 2 bye weeks this year that were a week later than the normal last bye week. And it was actually totally perfect for Tampa to have your bye week in week 13. And I think I look at this, Mike, and say that, the one thing about this coaching staff is they were not married to anything the whole year. Bruce Arians told me in August that the biggest lie that people say about him is that, well, he loves to throw the deep ball, and no matter who his quarterback is, he's going to force it deep. And he said, it's just watch our games, watch how we play. We're not that. And I mean, this game was a perfect example. Right. Okay, Brady threw a couple of balls downfield, but he really, he was not living with the deep ball. And they figured out what Brady likes to do, and they made it what they do really, really well. So, and plus the other thing, Mike, I think there was a story, basically a storyline after the Patriots season ended in 2019. I remember a lot of stuff being said and written after the Tennessee playoff loss. Brady's arm is shot. He can't throw it deep and all that. And that's one thing that proved to be very much a false narrative. Brady had plenty of arm all season long.
Yeah, and he threw some bullets. I mean, that touchdown to Antonio Brown was a laser.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and Gronk said it too. He said, I mean, he hasn't lost anything off of it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the one other thing you mentioned about Leftwich, look, I've been writing about this. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like a dog chasing a car. I just don't stop. I can't. I mean, this is more than about just Byron Leftwich, just about Todd Bowles. In my opinion, it's about black coaches and minority coaches in general. And I'll tell you, Troy Vincent, the NFL is on top of this too. I think he's going to push it this offseason. It is wrong to hire coaches before the end of the season. And the two best examples are the ones we saw on Sunday. If you had a coaching opening, you were racing to get it filled, right, just like everybody races to get them filled. Mike, the last 20 coaches hired in the coach hiring cycle over the last 4 years, the last 20 have been hired before the championship games are played. So in other words, you're hiring coaches or agreeing to deals with coaches before you can sit in the same room for the most part with all of these guys, and before you even see the final results of the season.
Right.
Don't you want to have I remember last year, Robert Saleh doesn't get the Cleveland job last year. He loses to Kevin Stefanski. And I remember thinking in the fourth quarter of the game against Kansas City, before the Chiefs came back in the last 7 minutes and won the game, great play by them. But there was maybe 10 minutes left in that game. And I remember specifically thinking at that time, I said, if this result stands and they really shut down Kansas City, I mean, Robert Saleh not getting a job is absurd, right. And look, I'm not saying anybody categorically should get a job. But what I am saying is that you've got to keep the door open till the end of the season. So I hope they do something about that.
Do you think that they can enforce that, though? Because we see so many times, even with free agency before the legal tampering window, they were agreeing to deals at the combine, But I guess if you can't hire them, there's a chance that somebody might change their mind on agreement, maybe. I don't know. I agree. I think that would be best if they had to wait till it was all over to start interviewing. But I also know that when these guys want what they want, they don't care about the rules.
I agree, Mike, but I also think that, I think we're in extraordinary times, because I'll tell you, one of the prime candidates who is black this postseason was talking to somebody in his organization who was commiserating with him. Hey, sorry, you didn't get a job this year. You really deserved it. Next year, we're going to have a great year this year, and next year you'll be right back in it. And he said, hey, I'm never getting a head coaching job in this league. And look, that there's a sadness to that. Yeah. There's almost, I think it was Steve Weich who wrote about this or talked about this on the air very recently, that the level of desperation and the level of kind of give up, in so many black coaches now is off the charts. And if for that reason only the NFL, which the NFL, I think is trying, but it's the owners, it's in the owners' hands, and the owners have to direct their club presidents and their GMs. If this passes, don't be screwing around with this rule, and I think the penalty should be high. Everyone should have a fair chance. If it were up to me, I would say Tuesday, February 9, 2 days after the Super Bowl, that's when the window opens, say 9 a.m. Then you can start interviewing and talking to coaches. And until then, you just got to wait.
Yeah. And I guess if you find them high draft picks, that's the one thing that could maybe, cause them to toe the line a little bit.
Yeah.
Lastly, I've held you for a while. Your favorite memory of the whole season?
My favorite memory of this season probably would be back around, I forget what the date was, maybe around August 13th. I had a very abbreviated training camp trip this year. It only lasted 8 days, but I spent 2 days in Tampa and I watched the first practice that Tom Brady ever played against his own defense.
Yeah.
And what I remember very specifically that day is how incredibly excited that defense was to play against Tom Brady. And the intensity that day, it was a game.
Wow.
That was a game. And I think it was Edwards. It might have been Murphy Bunting. I forget. I think it was Edwards, the backup safety, Mike Edwards, who had the first interception of Brady when they were playing 11 on 11.
Okay.
And he ran it back to the end zone, and his guys went and started jumping around like they just won the World Series, or I guess the Super Bowl.
Right.
And I just thought, and at that moment, I looked over at Brady, and he was walking over to Byron Leftwich and talking to him, and it was like, okay, next play, let's go.
Right.
And that was kind of what this season was like. They had that horrible loss at Chicago, the Monday night loss that was really kind of embarrassing. The Bears played well on defense, but the Bears were, couldn't do anything on offense, and they beat Tampa. And I started thinking to myself, you picked that team to win the Super Bowl, and the game they struggled against the Giants, right, that they should have lost in the Meadowlands. Yeah. And that's kind of what I mean about a Brady team is always better later in the year than it is early. But I think, Mike, I would say that. And the one other memory is I'm sitting here in my apartment in Brooklyn right now. And this is where I covered the NFL for 9 or 10 months, other than those 8 days I left and then the Super Bowl that I went to that, quite honestly, I'm still not sure it's worth NBC's money for me to have gone to the Super Bowl and then be talking by phone to people after the game the same way I would on the 7th floor of my apartment, my apartment building. So I don't know. What would you say? What's your memory of this season?
I guess I think it was the flexibility and creativity that we all had to have to do this job, and the flexibility that even coaches and players talked about. I mean, how they had to prepare, not having the same locker room time together, and things like that. And just really the way that everybody had to adjust to COVID and then to get through it. And as we got to the Super Bowl and it was kicking off, it's just like, wow, like we actually are here. And it's not ideal. I hated not being in locker rooms because I love that you can go around and talk to 7 different guys and get 5 stories out of that, and and watching and everything the same way. But just the flexibility that we all had to have was like, man, we got through it. We told the story. They played the season. We documented it as best we could, and we made it through. And I'm exhausted right now, but we all got through. So that's how I'll look at this season.
It's just like everybody in this country right now, when you look at, okay, you've got to change totally how you do your job.
Right.
And so then you have a choice, adapt or die. And I think, Mike, it's a lot easier for us to adapt than it is for, let's say, school teachers, students. I feel so sorry for so many of the parents, right, who've got to stay home and they got to do their jobs from home, and they've also got to be teachers' aides, and right, in some cases teachers. And, those are the people who I feel for. I certainly don't feel for us, in that particular case,
Yeah. Yeah. And, I just, like, I'm fortunate that we have resources. Like my son, he's on his Zoom call in the other room, but 2 days a week I would take him to his math tutor. And I'm blessed that I'm able to do that, because I know that there are a lot of kids who don't, and I think
Yeah.
his school, they had 50 kids who failed PE because they didn't have internet access, or they didn't have someone to stay with them. So we're very
Yeah.
blessed. It's sad just how much of a challenge it's been for people. But hopefully brighter days are ahead for everybody.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I really appreciate your insight, your time. It's been great. Thanks again. Been great following your work throughout the season, and we'll continue throughout the off season. And hopefully next year we'll see you at a training camp or something like that in person, since we won't have the
I
conference.
hope so too. I hope so too, Mike. Hey, listen, thanks a lot for reaching out. Appreciate being on with you.
All right. Thanks. You have a great one.
Support for this podcast comes from McDonald's. What does a Sprite from McDonald's taste like? Many say it's electrifying. Others believe that refreshing first sip is the best part. But don't take our word for it. Let your taste buds make their own assessment. Get any size soft drink for only $1 on the McDonald's $1, $2, $3 menu. Go ahead, try a spicy Sprite, or enjoy a Coke, Diet Coke, Fanta, or Dr. Pepper. Prices and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any offer or combo meal.
Thanks so much to Peter King. Go online and check out his work. As always, it's great to hear and learn from him. Great to discuss football. And this, I'm telling you, this was a crazy season, but a very memorable season. 2020 was a challenging year, just in life in general. But we've seen resiliency throughout our country, and we're seeing resiliency in the NFL as well. Hoping that 2021 brings brighter days for everybody. Thank you all for listening this season. I'll continue to roll out podcasts throughout the off season. It's going to be a different off season once again, but we'll be here. Once again, you can read me at usatoday.com. I wrote about the Super Bowl, and so did my other teammates at USA Today. Lots of great insight, great content there. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And I will talk to you guys again next time.